Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the organizers for arranging this wonderful event here, and thank you to everybody who attends this event today. I'm here today to talk about Neo Smart Economy, which is a blockchain platform, and how that is used to actually build an economy that is more efficient and can increase the economic welfare of our society. First, a short introduction about myself. So I work as Senior R&D Manager at NEO. I am based in Shanghai, sitting with around 30 other people in the Shanghai office. And we have around 100 to 200 open source developers spread out all over the world. A concentration in North America, Europe, and Australia. But we also see now developers coming from non-English speaking countries such as Malaysia, and Vietnam, and also in Turkey to help contribute to the open source platform. So my job at NEO is to manage the R&D team in Shanghai and the open source community that we have spread out all over the world. And also do research on use cases and use case integration. So I'm very happy to be here today with an audience like you here to hear about your pain points with these kind of ledger technologies and what kind of, how you prioritize different characteristics of different blockchains. Feel free to reach out to me on email. My email is here, malcolm@neo.org. I answer on every email that I get. And you can also send on me on Discord. I will explain a little bit more about Discord later on. So these kind of conferences and workshops usually start by explaining what blockchain is, and I will not do that today because I don't think it's too relevant with a wide audience. A lot of engineers here, and there are a lot of managers, there's people from the government, and the key point with blockchain technology is to know what it is used for and when we want to use it, and not how it works specifically. Those of you who want to know how blockchain works in specifically most likely already know about that. For example, if you, I will let's see in here, how many of you use internet in your daily work? I think it should be everyone, right? And how many of you know how it works behind the scenes technically with TCP, IP, ISP connections and how everything is connected? Still quite a lot of people, but still less than everyone. So that's the same thing with blockchain technology, that it's good to know how it works, but the key aspect is to know when we want to use it and what we want to use it for. So blockchain has a very great potential to increase economic welfare. So what do I mean with this? Well, this is a graph that is used very often in economic studies when you're looking at perfect competition and how that affects the economic welfare of a society. So how many of you in here have seen a similar picture like this before? Also, quite a lot of people. So for you who haven't seen a picture like this before, the blue area on this graph represents the producer surplus, and the pink area in top is the consumer surplus. And when you have some sort of monopolistic situation where the producer sets the price on their own for the products and services, they will set the price such as to maximize their profit. That's how business works. And they will do so on cost of the total consumer surplus. Since higher cost, then there will be less consumers who can actually take benefit of that product or service. So if you look at the whole market and the society as a whole, you end up with an economic net loss, which is the gray area on this graph. And what blockchain can do in this area is mainly two aspects, and that's what's also mentioned before, transparency and trust. So in monopolistic situation, there are, for example, one entity or a few entities in an oligarchy that actually controls the whole market, and they desire to continue to do so. So they will keep information about their supply chains, on their suppliers, on their processes. They will keep that within their company so that it's a higher market entry barrier for competitors. But not only that, you also see that in certain areas you have a lot of cost that is related to trust itself. And I can take a personal example. I'm a Swedish citizen and I'm a resident in China. And whenever I want to use a Swedish document in China, I have to take this document from wherever I get it from in Sweden. I have to take it to a notary. The notary have to certify that the person who issued the document is the correct person. I then need to take the notarized document to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sweden to have them confirm that the notary is a correct notary. And that's not enough either. Then I need to take the certified document from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, take it to the Chinese embassy in Sweden, and have them approve that the document is approved by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So there's a lot of steps, and this is official documents, but I think many of you can also draw parallels to your own business where you need to go through several steps just to establish the trust. And if you would reduce these costs in this graph, that would represent to the demand or the supply line, that would be, the slope would be much lower, so that we can increase the total area on the left side, thus also increasing the total welfare. So this is how blockchain can actually help to increase the welfare of a country as a whole if we apply it in the correct way. So how do we reduce the cost for trust then? Well, we need, first of all, digitization of assets, and we already do have that in many cases. So, for example, draw parallels to Sweden again, we have land deeds in Sweden which are digitized, so ownership of land deeds are stored centrally. We have also ownership of vehicles, which is also stored digitally. But there are other assets as well which are not stored digitally yet. And the issue with these are also that it's stored centrally. So you have the issue of trust also in these, even if it is in a central server. The second part we need is to have programmable actions. So connecting back to the example I said with the documents that need to be authorized by multiple entities, it would be much more efficient if we can do this automatically instead. So instead of having the person itself go to each individual entity, get the document confirmed, and then bring it to the next entity, we can actually do this in an automated manner, as long as we have the last part, which is automated trust or a trustless system, where you can actually confirm trust without having these centralized authorities. And this is usually where I tend to see some people squirm a little bit. What is the point then? Do we want to replace centralized authorities with the blockchain technology? And the answer is no, or actually, to be totally honest, is yes or no, depending on who you ask. So to explain that a little bit more, let's go through the use case of blockchain technology and how it got started. In 2008, we got Bitcoin, and this use case for Bitcoin was very simple. It was just supposed to be a digital currency. In 2014, we got Ethereum. And Ethereum, they realized, Vitalik Buterin, that we can actually have these automated programmable actions, which I mentioned in the last slide. We can have that on blockchain technology to have applications to be run very reliably and not being subject to the issue of centralization. And the goal is to build unstoppable applications. So if you go to the Ethereum website, that's one of the first things you will see is to build unstoppable applications. So is this really what we want to have then? Well, NEO, which is the third generation of blockchain, we have a quite different vision of what we want to use blockchain technology for. So what we want to build is actually a smart economy. We see the technical benefits that we get with blockchain technology, and to have reliable software that can be executed according to programmable action is one of the big advantages. But we want to do so because of the technical advantages and not because of some idea of having unstoppable applications. So the mindset of our blockchain and our team and our community is very, very different from that of, for example, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So to build this smart economy, we want to have something that can actually work alongside the current economy. We want to have something that is compliant to the laws and regulations in each individual jurisdiction, and we want to have something that is adaptable, so that if one jurisdiction have very specific needs, then the blockchain can be built to also fulfill those needs of that jurisdiction. So it's not about building a substitute for economy, which many other platforms set out to do, but it's more to build a tool that the current economy can use to make our use cases much more efficient. And there are three pillars in this vision to create a smart economy. And the first is digital assets. The second one is digital identity. And the third one is smart contracts. Smart contracts is the representation of automated action, programmable actions. And digital identity is very interesting from two aspects. So digital identity is very important in programmable actions. For example, if you sign a deal digitally with someone, you want to know who the other person is. So even if you know that the terms and conditions will be carried through 100% because of that's how the smart contract is programmed, you still want to know who the other party is. Who are you actually entering this deal with? And what kind of history do that person have? And digital identity can help with that problem. But also on a second level, because of how, for example, Ethereum and Bitcoin are set up to be as decentralized as possible. That's one of their goals, to be unstoppable. So they want to have as many nodes as possible confirming transactions on the network. That works very different on NEO. So in NEO, there are a lot fewer nodes. Currently, there's only 7 nodes that are actually part of producing the blocks to confirming the transactions and creating the next blocks in the blockchain. And these consensus nodes are also identifiable with a public identity. So the blockchain is meant to be run by parties who are identifiable. So it's not supposed to be something to work behind the scenes. It's actually supposed to work together with the current economy. And what we have seen when NEO got started was that we had this platform called Ethereum that was built upon the Bitcoin technology. So the use case itself is very brilliant and very smart to have actually decentralized application that can be reliable, and it can be performed and it cannot be stopped. That itself is very brilliant. And on the other hand, that technology is built upon a use case which is supposed to be an unstoppable currency. So the platform and underlying technology itself is not built for smart contracts. So NEO asked the questions, why don't we just solve the core issue itself to build a platform that's actually meant to be used for large-scale decentralized application? So that's actually why NEO was built, and what our mission is to actually provide this platform and to have a system where all the participants in the network are incentivized to work with the same goals in mind. So it's basically a new infrastructure for decentralized applications, and it has a certain characteristics that are very specific to NEO itself. So for example, if we compare transaction speeds themselves, the NEO platform can do between 1,000 and 10,000 transactions per second, which is compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum is quite fast. And but we also realized that, that this is in the current state, and it's not fast enough. We also realized that, so we have already started work on achieving 100,000 transactions per second by 2020. And this is main chain speed. So you will see, for example, projects talking about off-chain solutions and dynamic sharding and so forth. And when we say our transaction speed and our goals of 100,000 transactions per second, we talk about the main speed transactions without the scaling capabilities. So adding scaling capabilities on top of this, it will be much, much faster. So you can see scaling capabilities as a multiplier of the main chain speed. If you have, for example, an off-chain scaling solution and you put it on Ethereum, then the multiplier would be 10 to 20 transactions per second, because sooner or later you have to put it back on the main chain again, while the multiplier on NEO would be 1,000 to 10,000. So the capabilities of scaling in the future is also much, much higher than the options that we currently have. And it's also meant to be used by developers. So we now have a lot of IT and programmers spread all over the world who are excellent developers in all kinds of different programming languages. And a big obstacle to adoption of these blockchain technologies and writing decentralized applications is that these platforms are limited to 1 or 2 programming languages. So for a software developer getting started on these platforms, they first have to learn a new programming language, and then they can start to learn how smart contracts works and how blockchain works. Well, you don't have to do that on Neo. So in Neo, you can use all the engineers that you already have within your enterprise. If you have C# developers, then you can have them develop smart contracts. If you have Python developers, then you can have them to use the language they are familiar with to build these smart contracts. And one advantage which I think is not perhaps marketed enough or known enough in the industry is the finality in the Neo blockchain. So let's see with a raise of hands again, how many of you have actually transferred a token using a proof of stake or proof of work blockchain from one wallet or to another wallet? That's maybe 1/3 of the audience. So then you know that you need to wait a certain number of confirmations before the transaction is actually complete. I will talk a little bit more about in the next slide. So for example, if you have you need 15 confirmations, then you need to wait 15 blocks before the transaction is complete. And Neo has perfect finality. So each transaction is actually 100% finalized after every block. And we have aligned interests, so there is no conflict of interest within the participants in the Neo blockchain. So as I mentioned earlier, the number of nodes that are actually participating in creating the blocks are much fewer in the Neo blockchain than you would see in, for example, Ethereum or Bitcoin. And their incentive is also to increase the capacity of the network. So we have already seen in other blockchain platforms that some people want to increase the capacity of the transaction speed with getting resistance from miners, for example, because they can earn more transaction fees by keeping transaction speed or transaction capabilities limited. And you will not have this conflict of interest in Neo because the block creators are actually incentivized to increase the capacity of the network. And by having also fewer consensus nodes and having these with the known identity, it makes for easy network upgrades. And the system is also built to have free transactions. So for the end user, he doesn't have to pay extra fees for every single interaction with the blockchain, but he can actually do so for free. And of course, these sort of scaling solution, Lightning, Raiden, and so forth that are discussed in these other technologies, they are just technical solutions. They are not specific to a certain blockchain, so you can apply those to Neo as well to scale it even further. So I would like to say a few words about perfect finality so that everybody understands what the impact that actually has. When you have a proof of work or proof of stake algorithm, you have to wait for between 6 to 30 confirmation, but depending on what kind of blockchain it is. And the reason why you have to do so is because the algorithm itself can fork during consensus. So you end up with a chain that looks like this, and each blue square here represents a block in the blockchain. And to wait 6 to 30 confirmation is to make sure that you actually are on the longest chain, so that you are sure that your transaction is actually finalized. And so what you end up with is that the final transaction time is not the block time. So the final transaction time is actually the block time multiplied by the number of confirmations that you need. So if you have a block time of 15 seconds and you need, for example, 10 confirmations, then you end up with a full transaction time of 150 seconds. And this is a restriction in many use cases, not the least if you're working with in the financial industry. And, but also if you're working with any sort of application which requires a series of smart contracts that are triggering each other. And if you would need to wait 150 seconds between each and every interaction, then that is a large restriction of what you can actually do with that platform. So NEO has a consensus algorithm that's called the Delegated Byzantine Fault Tolerance, and the short for that is DBFT. And the special characteristic with that is that you have 100% finality in every single block. So when a block is confirmed, it only needs one confirmation. After every block, you know that every transaction in that block is 100% final. The blockchain itself does not fork during consensus mode. So it means that, well, first of all, that if you're working with high volume or high value transactions, you can be 100% sure that your transactions are actually part of the correct blockchain after every single confirmation, which you cannot be with proof of work and proof of stake. And you also reach the 100% finality. And the 100% finality itself is difficult in proof of work and proof of stake, since you look for the longest chain, you get closer and closer to 100%, but not all the way to 100%. And in DBFT, you actually do have the 100% after every single block. So the transaction time in NEO and our consensus algorithm is the block time itself. So if the block time is 15 seconds, that's also the transaction time that you will have in your use cases. And this opens up for many new use cases and business cases to use blockchain and not being reliant on the confirmation times. And in terms of being compliant and having different use case scenario, we see also that there is a need for a combination of private and public chains. So what does this mean? Well, NEO has, of course, it's a public blockchain, which everybody can access. But NEO is also built to be used as a permission chain, so you can just fork the project and use it privately within your enterprise. So if you have use cases where you can cut costs by using blockchain technologies within your company, within your enterprise, and you don't want the data itself to be public to outside of your enterprise, then you can just host a private NeoNet to do so. And we have the NeoX, which is a cross-chain protocol, which means that you can actually use the private net for your internal needs, and you can connect that to the public chain for the use cases where you need a public chain. And this allows, for example, if you have certain jurisdiction regulations in certain countries which you need to adhere to, then you can have a specific NEO chain for that jurisdiction alone, and you can actually specify in which use cases you would like that chain to connect to the global public NEO blockchain, if at all. So that's also, of course, optional. So the status today is that NEO is built from scratch. So when NEO was started in 2016, it was evident that the current algorithms and the current solutions for fulfilling the industry use cases were difficult, if not impossible, with the suggested solutions at that time. So it's built from scratch. It has been running now mainnet since 2016. So it's not a new blockchain. It has been running stable online for 1.5 years already. And here's just a picture of the public endpoints which anybody can connect to grab data from the network. You can also run your own node, so you can just run the Neo CLI or the Neo GUI to run your own node. We have a very large developer support. So I mentioned earlier that we support a wide range of programming languages. For example, C#, Java, JavaScript, Python, and so forth. So we have actually our own virtual machine, which is called Neo VM, to run these program or these smart contracts written in the language that you prefer. And we have also documentation on how to get started with the development. And just to give just an indication of how large our community actually is, we have a chat tool which is called Discord. I will give you a link later. It's just the left one here, where our developers and the community can discuss real time with each other. I think you will see that tonight also in Michael's presentation and workshop on how to develop on Neo, on how active our community actually is. We have more than 88,000 subscribers on our Reddit channel, and that's about 1/4 of what Ethereum currently has. And we have 300,000 followers on Twitter, and Ethereum has 380,000. So we are catching up quite fast, and we are seeing that there is a large interest in using the NEO blockchain, and that NEO is actually fulfilling quite a lot of needs that the industry is asking for. So just to give an indication of where the NEO blockchain is being used, we just completed or finalized a competition together with Microsoft that has been running since late November last year. So the competition just ended now on the last of March. And here is the number of participants in that competition based on country. The screenshot is taken from the, let's see, the 2nd of March. So there are a lot of Chinese projects developing on top of NEO blockchain. And you also see that United States have a large number of people. And then we see India, Russia, and Australia. And we have also a lot of developers in Europe, but since it's split by per country in Europe, it's not as visible on this graph here. So what we've seen is that mostly English-speaking countries and Chinese-speaking countries have started to adopt NEO already, mostly because that's the main languages that NEO supported to start with. But now we, as I mentioned earlier as well, we see that there are popping up communities. For example, in Japan, there is a new development community. There is a new development community in Vietnam, Malaysia. There are also some here in Turkey. So that's very exciting to see. And here is a link or a page of links. So usually when I have my presentation, I like to say that if you want to take one picture of any of my slides, then this is the one you should take a picture of, because this is how you find more information about NEO and how to get started, and just to get more information in general about what NEO does and what NEO can do and how it's different from other blockchain. And as I mentioned, feel free to email me. I answer on everything. And if you are a developer, so the software engineers in here, I strongly recommend you to go to the link at the bottom in Discord to see our community there. And that's my presentation, and if we have the time, we can take a few questions as well.
Mr. Malcolm'a sorularınız varsa alabiliriz. Slido'dan da yine kare 6309'dan yine sorularınızı iletebilirsiniz. Ama şu anda canlı soru sormak isteyene mikrofonu uzatacağız.
Yeah, we have one in the back there. Great.
Evet, mikrofonu bu tarafa alalım. Hı hı. Evet, sili.do'dan kare 6309 koduyla sorularınızı ulaştırabilirsiniz. Canlı soru sormak isteyene de mikrofonu uzatacağız. Evet, buyurun mikrofonu sağ taraftaki beyefendileri alalım. Evet. Buyurun.
Merhabalar, teşekkür ederiz sunumunuz için. İki sorum olacak. Öncelikle
Translation, do you need translation? Evet, onu da alalım. Mr. Malcolm. Evet. Buyur. You're welcome. Bir saniye. Biraz bekleyelim. Şimdi yeniden sorunuzu alabiliriz.
Yes.
Buyurun.
Sunum için çok teşekkürler. İki sorum olacak. İlk sorum gizlilikle alakalı, privacy ile alakalı. Olarak gizliliği nasıl sağlıyorsunuz? Yani doğrulayıcı notların belirli notlar olduğunu söylemiştiniz. Bookkeeper'ların sabit olduğunu söylemiştiniz. Bu bookkeeper'lar, doğrulayıcı notlar tüm transaction'ları görebiliyor mu? Çünkü finansal sektörde aslında gizlilik aranan bir ihtiyaç da olabiliyor. Bunu tam olarak nasıl sağlayabiliyorsunuz? İkincisi de public-private olarak konumlandırdığınız zaman tam olarak bir business olarak mı konumlandırırsınız yoksa public olarak mı konumlandırırsınız? Çünkü bir permission network olduğu zaman tüm katılımcıların aslında bir sertifikasyondan geçmesi gerekmektedir, tanıtılması gerekmektedir sisteme. Bunun ölçeklenebilirliğe zarar vermekte midir? Bunu nasıl sağlıyorsunuz? Bunu açıklayabilir misiniz? Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you for the question. So the first question regarding privacy and how to ensure that in a public blockchain. For example, private data that you don't want to be public. And there are a quite simple solution to that. For these kind of use cases, you don't want to use a public blockchain. So for these kind of use cases, you would not use the public version of the NEO blockchain. So what if you would like to use the NEO blockchain or the NEO consensus and the NEO code for these kind of use cases, what you would do is to actually host a private net yourself within your company so that you have control over all the consensus nodes and use that as a closed private net for the transactions that you have there. And then if you want to connect that to a public net as well, you can do that with the NEO cross-chain protocol, but that's not a requirement. So you can actually have a private net with the NEO blockchain without making anything at all public to the outside world. And if we position ourselves as a public chain or a business chain, it's actually both, and that's what I also wanted to show you in. Let's see if I can find the slide here. So it depends completely on the use case that you have, and that's also why we have the NeoX protocol. For some use cases, what you want to have is exactly what you say. You want to have it all private. So for these cases, you would have what you see as at the left side here on the slide. So you would have all the data privately, and you would, if you need blockchain for your use case and you want the data to be private, you would just keep it internally. And for some cases, you would like to have a specific public chain, but only for your use case. So you would host a public chain, but you would use your own nodes for it, so you can have public and transparent data but still having control of the nodes themselves. And the public chain of NEO, that's it's not permanent nodes, but those nodes are actually voted in by the ones who are holding the NEO token. The NEO token is a governance token for the public blockchain, so that those will vote in the consensus nodes on the public chain. And the voting system itself and the network rewards are built in such a way that the consensus nodes that has the best performance will be voted in. And I do have a slide on that, but I'm not sure if I have time to present it in detail, but there is a slide on how it works and how we can ensure that the consensus nodes are actually having the highest performance possible. And it's basically described by the economic model. And I can also explain that afterwards together with you on email or just in the hallway for those who are interested in that, so we can save some time.
Thank you. Başka sorusu olan? Buyurun.
Türkçe mi sorayım yoksa İngilizce mi sorayım?
Translation olduğu için, çeviri olduğu için nasıl isterseniz.
Teşekkür ederim sunum için. 7 tane node var diyorsunuz. Bu nodların hepsine de NEO sahip. Acaba bu decentralized sayılır mı? Yeni node eklemeyi düşünüyor musunuz? Bu kadar. Teşekkür ederim.
That's also a very good question. And yes, the 7 nodes are now all controlled by the NEO Council. So in terms of decentralization of ownership, it's not decentralized, and that's true. On the testnet, we now have 3 nodes from a community group called COZ. We have 1 node from KPN, which is one of the largest telecommunication providers in the Netherlands. And we have 1 node from Fembusher Capital, which is one of the largest blockchain investor groups in East Asia. So these are nodes that are in the progress of being voted in on the mainnet. So the plan is to bootstrap the decentralization by voting in nodes that have aligned interests of building this smart economy. And once that bootstrap is complete, then the NEO tokens are also more and more distributed So in the end, it's the power of the new holders to vote in the ones that are actually fulfilling or aligning the needs of the new holders with the system itself.
Evet. Efendim, buyurun.
I have some remarks, Malcolm. As you know, we have an evening section today, which is Michael Herman will be giving some trainings, in fact, hands-on training on the screen. So, Türkçe yapsak daha iyi olur sanki. Akşam üzeri önemli bir eğitimimiz var. Michael burada doğrudan smart contract kodlamayı anlatacak. O oturuma katılan arkadaşlarımız için de her birine birer eğitim sertifikası imzalı olarak takdim edeceğiz. Zannedersem soruları bitirmemiz lazım.
Evet, süremiz.
Şimdi herhalde araya çıkacağız değil mi?
Evet, şimdi bir aramız var. Aradan sonra.
Bu sesini kaçırmamanızı tavsiye ediyorum. Akşama kadar enerjimiz bitiyor biliyorum. Ama 3'ten sonra, 5'ten sonra daha doğrusu 3 saatlik bir eğitimimiz var. Evet. Teşekkür ederiz.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi 15 dakikalık bir aramız var. Thank you for your speech, Mr. Malcolm Lerider. Büyük bir alkış alalım Mr. Malcolm Lerider'a.